gang activity doesn't necessarily just include kids. We have what we see now as second and third generation gang members, where you have a grandparent that's a gang member, you have a parent that's a gang member, and then you have a kid that's a gang member. So, you know, it's not just youth, although a lot of times the youth are the most active that we see on the surface. Some of the older gang members do things a little bit more under the surface, but the level of violence among youth has increased. The other thing that we see now is that instead of these traditional names that we used to see, like the Gangster Disciples, the Crips or Bloods, we're seeing what I call clique banging, where kids are creating their own, you know, new gangs. They have a group of friends that they grew up with, or a couple of other kids that have the same interests or like-minded things that they like to do, and so they will band together and call themselves a name, and they'll have a hand sign, and so those particular groups meet our definition of a gang. Some of the causes of the issues with young people and gangs is that disrespect is huge. You know, used to be people talked about territory. Well, you know, they're invading so-and-so's territory. Right now, it's about disrespect. And the difference between the past and now is that, you know, when I was growing up, if we had a problem with someone, you know, you had to actually go to that person and have a conversation face to face and say, hey, I hear you've been talking trash about me, or you wrote a letter, or, you know, if you wanted to communicate, it was a little bit more personal. Now, with the internet, which we didn't have when I was growing up, and cell phones, we didn't have cell phones, so you had to actually dial the rotary phone. That's how old I am, dial the rotary phone. Now you send a text message, you inbox someone on Facebook, you post something to Twitter, and not only do you and that person see it, but everyone else. So that causes a lot more pressure because you're worrying about what everybody else is thinking. So you add that to young people and how they process information and how they deal with information and the maturity level. It gets pretty interesting, and it gets pretty dangerous because they go straight from that to the violence. I would say that parents need to really start paying attention. I would say right now, elementary school, you know, 4th grade, 5th grade. You know, I'm thinking, you know, as a parent, you know, taking off my police officer hat, putting on my parent hat, I would be looking at that stuff in 3rd and 4th grade, finding out, you know, who's doing what, you know, how are they acting out, what are they saying, and then paying really close attention to the kids that my kids are associating with. If your kid's behavior is changing, if they're saying some things that you don't normally hear them say, you know, we start to see them mimicking or you know, acting out those gang type behaviors at an early age. Then, you know, elementary school, sometimes the recruiting will start 4th and 5th grade. They may have an older brother or sister who's recruiting, you know, and then they start emulating that behavior. And then middle school is where we start to see a definite increase in the activity and actually, you know, dressing the dress, talking the talk, walking the walk, and those things like that. You know, as a parent, if you see your kid only wanting to wear a certain color all the time, or if, you know, they're saying, they're using slang that you've never heard them say before, something out of the ordinary other than what you would hear is, you know, with the hip-hop slang or any other type of slang, this is different type of stuff. And you can tell, you know, when you hear it, it just sounds different. You know, if they're wanting to be called something other than their given name, you know, whatever the norm for your kid, if that changes. Now you have normal teenage behavior that, you know, kids hate their parents. I'm a teenager, I hate my parents, and all this other stuff. But there's another level on top of that of there's more disrespect, more outward disrespect and more violent behavior, even in the home, where, you know, a simple question like, can you do the dishes? I mean, the level of disrespect, you know, would be much higher a lot of times. Sometimes you don't even get those signals. Some kids are very clever at hiding their gang affiliation. They are angels at home, but when they are out in the street or hanging out with their friends, it's a totally different type of behavior. Some kids are very good at hiding their affiliation. I tell parents, get on Facebook. You know, I would tell parents not to let their kids have a Facebook account until they're at least, you know, seniors in high school. You know, it's a lot of the communication between younger gang members now is on the internet, on Facebook. So if you have a kid who has a Facebook account, monitor that as a parent. Get the password. Be able to get into it. Make that a condition of them having, you know, Facebook. Or Twitter or whatever. Monitor that. You know, as a parent, you have to be a very good detective. Anyone's kid can be involved in gang activity if you're not paying attention. We lose somebody in the traffic. And on top of that, you may be a perfect parent. You may have, perfect lifestyle. You may have great kids, and your kid can be involved in gang activity, and you'd never know. When we do some of these home visits, we go and we talk to the parents, because a lot of the parents are unaware. So we make them aware of the concerns. If the gang unit is visiting your house and wanted to talk to you about your kid, I mean, it's serious. There are some current concerns, and we're trying to get out ahead of that to give you some information about what may be going on. And there have been places I've gone to where the parent will say, well, my kid's not involved, and we'll go and look in the closet, and all the clothes are the same color. There's graffiti on the shoes, there's graffiti on the walls, and the parents just don't know what that means. They think it's just, a kid thing. This is what the kids are doing. But it's actual gang graffiti. So we point it out to them, we educate them. And I think parents have to educate themselves on what's going on with gangs in the community. They have to be experts, so to speak. They have to have some working knowledge of what it looks like, because, again, anyone's kid could be involved. And, once we make that parent aware of what's going on, then we try to give them some tools, or we try to connect them with people who work with young people, because, we are police officers, and our scope is to, investigate crimes and make arrests. However, we do, I feel like we do a little bit extra job with connecting young people with people who work in this field, like social workers, grassroots intervention and prevention programs like Mentoring Positives. And so we try to connect people with those people that are actually out trying to redirect kids. And we do a fair amount of just mentoring ourselves, informal mentoring, and trying to talk to young people and find out what's going on in their head, and asking them, what do you want to do in life? What do you want to be? Sometimes they just don't know how to get there. So there's times where we say, hey, if you want to do this, then you need to do this. I was talking to a young man today that said he wanted to be a veterinarian. I said, well, maybe, you're 16 years old. Maybe you want to think about job shadowing someone, that's runs an animal hospital. Talk to them. Ask them what you need to do now as a 16-year-old in high school to get yourself ready to go to college to study veterinary medicine. I said, have you ever thought about that? No, I never thought about that. I said, yeah. I said, if you're out in the streets and you're hanging out and you're gangbanging, I said, you're limiting your ability to be able to connect with some adults that can help you get where you're going to be. It's not just going to happen. You have to make it happen. So I tell young people, you can let the state and the school and all these other people decide who you're going to be, or you can make that decision and decide for yourself who you're going to be. And if you pick this road, this gang activity road, it's going to lead you to two places. It's going to lead you to prison, or it's going to lead you to the graveyard, one of the two. I mean, there's really no in between. I mean, there's no retirement plans for gang members. There really aren't. No matter what level or intensity of gang activity in your community, it puts you in contact with the criminal justice system. And when you talk about hope, at the end of the day, building those relationships with kids has really helped us in our job, and has really been able to overcome some of the hurdles and obstacles to solving crime, to doing prevention, because our legitimacy in the community was down. Police legitimacy in the community was, you had a lot of this whole no snitching policy and things like that, and we had to develop legitimacy, and we had to develop trust through those relationships that we were building. And so a lot of it was about talking. We would see people and we would just strike up conversations, and we would talk about hopes and dreams, and people started to see us more as people, as human beings, and not robots in blue. So when the time came, for when bad things happened, people felt comfortable calling us, because they knew they were going to be treated fairly, and it would be firm, and we would get down to the point, and we would tell them, this is what's going on. Everybody on our team has really gone out and made some relationships with some great kids, and some of these kids are heavily gang involved, but we see them in two ways. We see them as young people that are just have so much potential, but we also know that they have another side of them that could easily be someone that would go out and commit an armed robbery. We're not the judges of people's worth in society. We're not. We just have to make decisions about their actions, and so we let them know up front, we're not judging you, but what you did is wrong, and so we're going to hold you accountable for that. They get it, and they expect us to do that, and I think they respect us for doing that, because we're like, hey, you messed up, it's not personal, but we got to take care of this business. Almost like a parent. It's almost like we're parenting almost 2,000 kids, that get involved in this type of activity. So And some of them like us, some of them don't. But at the end of the day, I always tell them, hey, you know what? This isn't personal. You know, I do care about you, and I hate seeing you be involved in this, but, you know, we have business we got to take care of, and you did something wrong, and, you know, we're going to have to try to hold you accountable for that. So, you know, we do the best we can. It can get to you sometimes. You know, you get a little emotional. I was talking to a kid today, and I was kind of tearing up talking to him because I remember when he was this little, and, you know, and I'm seeing him now, and I know he's involved in some things, and, you know, I was just telling him, I was like, you know, hey, you need to be careful out there. But at the same time, I'm thinking other people need to be careful when they come across you, you know. So, again, he was talking about joining the Marines. You know, I spent time in the Marines, and I said, we need to get you out of the community so you can see some different things, so you don't have to, you know, come every time someone calls you because they've got beef. You don't have that pressure to respond when people say, we need you to help us go out and handle this business. You know, we need you to help us go out and beat these people up. You're in the military. You're you know, changing your life. And I said, when you leave here, you can reinvent yourself. There's no pressure for you to be this person anymore. And I think he thought about it, you know, and then he went out and tried to threaten somebody. So it's like raising kids, you know, 2 steps forward, 5 steps back, maybe 6 steps forward. You have success stories, and they let you down, and you get disappointed, and you lose sleep over them, just like your own kids. And it's a tough. This is the most rewarding and the toughest job I've ever had on the police department. It really is. But, you know, right now, I don't know if I would want to do anything else. You know, I really don't.